1, 2, 3, 4 steps I take from my bed to the floor. 5, 6, 7, 8. Will today be rough or will today be great? 9, 10, 11, 12. Lately I've been going through hell. 13, 14, 15, 16. Today's the day. Are you coming? Are you I'm sick of being normal, I'm sick of being average. I'm sick of being mortal, I'm about to be a savage. I see a lot of things that I want, I will have them. I got a new mindset that I just established. I'll march through the cold with the nails on the pavement. I'll shovel that coal just to get out the basement. My story will be told, helping others make changes. I'll be so bold, they will watch in amazement.
Am I gonna face it? Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start or will I keep waiting? Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it. Am I gonna face it? Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start or will I keep waiting? Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it.
Foot up on the pedal, pushing hard to the metal. Make a deal with the devil, channel rage through my vessel into something that is special. Energy of a rebel, going up a level. I just wanna be greatness, I could feel changes. Turn a new page and tie up my laces. I will be the bravest, break out of my cages. I will not be nameless, I will not be aimless.
Am I gonna chase it? Am I gonna start or will I keep waiting? Time is limited, quickly fading. Get my mind right, it's my time to take it. Am I gonna chase it?
Yo, what's up?
Keep waiting. Time is
No one's here yet.
quickly fading.
Who cares?
It's my time to
Woo!
take it.
I'll leave her up. Doesn't matter. How y'all doing tonight? Oh, leave me alone. I want the other cat. No, I want the other ones. No, I want my other cats. I like my other cats better than you. I like them better. I've had them longer. Besides, you're fat. I like skinny people. You're too fat for me. You're too fat. Mm-hmm. Scaring away my good cats. All right. We are going to start off with some Wise Disciple, and then we're going to go into some other more pressing stuff. We might or may not get into... I have a video for Dan McKellen. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do the intro with the video for Dan McKellen so I can edit this later and turn it into a short. So let's start off with that. Need some water. Let's use my professional voice. Polly Watercracker, Walla Walla, Washington. There can be only one until all are one. Hi. You're so weird. Okay. Some more water. Okay, so I plan to clip this, but if I don't clip it, you'll see it later on as a short or on TikTok. I got peanuts stuck in my mouth. I shouldn't have eaten peanuts. I should have sucked the popcorn. Oh well. All right, here we go. So this is a question for Dan McKellen, the TikTok Bible scholar on YouTube. So here we go, Dan. Mr. Dan McKellen. Let's see if you can answer this question, all right? In Matthew 16:18, many apologists make semantic distinctions between Petra, Petros, and Kephas. This was actually a big point on a lot of YouTube apologist videos recently. My primary question, however, is what are the Greek terms we translate as church and hell in the famous verse, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it"? Specifically, the Greek words which are translated as church and hell in this passage. What do they mean in their Greek context? And what implications do these terms carry in the Aramaic language Jesus would have been speaking? Dan, if you could answer this question, I would be very grateful, and that would be very awesome. Thank you. Also, Electra will like you just a little bit more if you can answer this question. Thank you. All right, we'll do something with that. Who knows? If B.S. Lewis is watching later on, you want to clip that and put it out for me, that'd be great, because I'm lazy and I don't feel like doing the work. All right, let's continue. Here we go. Swing. I want in the comic books for them to introduce Victor and have Victor have him do flashbacks to him coming up, and then have him take revenge in the comics against Penguin. That'd be great. That'd be fine. All right, let's see what's going on with Wise Disciple. He looks all dramatic in this video.
Gave a keynote recently about the Christian experience of wandering through wilderness, and I'm concerned that not enough of us are ready for that. We're not ready for that experience, right? What are you going to do when God sends you out into the wilderness? I can tell you that I was not ready. When God sent me into my wilderness period, I had so much to learn, and I had been through school. I got a theology degree. I was a pastor, and I still wasn't ready. As a matter of fact, I'm making this video because I believe that there's teaching in here that you've never heard before, right? So if you're feeling lost and you're wandering right now, this one's definitely for you. By the way, my name is Nate, and this is Wise Disciple, where I'm helping you become the effective Christian that Jesus wants you to be. And that absolutely entails understanding what to do when God sends you into the wilderness. Amen? Make sure to like, sub, and share this one around, but only if this blesses you and you think it's going to bless somebody else, all right? Let's get right into it.
The way Moses tells this story, failure is foregrounded. The story begins, verse 2, and it ends, verse 7.
So I thought this was going to be something else. This is not what I was hoping for from Nate. Let's fast forward 5 minutes, see what we got, because otherwise we're going to go into the other stuff.
And the people will drink. That's, so we're going to get to Piper to be a Christian. It's that you enter into these.
In your wilderness, don't be like that. I mean, listen, Psalm 95, verse 7.
Okay, we're moving on to something else. I am so sorry, guys. That was not a good. Darn it, Nate. Darn it, Nate. Who wants to do? Well, let's look at what's on my list first before we go into. Because I know I want to do. Alex O'Connor. I guess we can do Alex O'Connor right now. I kind of wanted to do this one as well. Too many things that I want to do. We'll get to Alex O'Connor in a second. Let's do a little bit of over here, because this I found very interesting. So, as you know, I did some videos taking down Lauren Chen, and then Lauren Chen was evaporated. Not because of me, but because of her own stupidity. So let's check out, I think it's this one that has the better video. We're just going to look at the opening.
Like and subscribe.
Or related proceedings.
I just want to look at the
has
opening
concluded
statement.
on their advice that answering view
And to meeting number one on public
So, Lauren Chen, for those of you here in the U.S. who don't know, she's currently on trial up in Canada. The trial is going to actually be here in the U.S. for the criminal stuff, but she has a way to get, I guess what we would call immunity down here by speaking to the, I don't know if they're called the Senate, the House, the Parliament, whatever. Speaking to these Canadian dudes, she can get immunity. But because whatever she says there would make her liable here in the U.S., she doesn't want to take that because she wouldn't be immune here. Because in America, instead, you have the right to remain silent. You don't have that right in Canada. So she's, even though she's Canadian, she's taking the American route. She's choosing to be an American. Even in this situation, she's like, I'd rather be an American. Okay, that's ballsy. Here we go.
safety and national security.
I am here today as required by the summons delivered to me. My understanding is you wish to ask me questions about a subject you are studying with a view of making recommendations as part of your legislative role. After consulting with counsel, both in Canada and the United States, I have concluded on their advice that answering questions from this committee could reasonably provide a, quote, link in the chain toward a possible indictment against me with respect to the above-mentioned or related proceedings. I recognize that the difficulty is that the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution does not apply in Canada. I am aware that I have no right to plead the Fifth before this committee. I've been advised, and I do believe, the one policy reason behind Canada's lack of protection, similar to the American Fifth Amendment, is that Canada has a different form of protection located within Section 13 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which provides that if I testify in proceedings, I have the right not to have any incriminating evidence so given to be used to incriminate me in other proceedings subject to exceptions that would not apply here. This is how the American protection against self-incrimination is not formally recognized in Canada. However, Section 13 of the Charter is not formally recognized in the United States, and so it would not be of assistance to me should I accede to answering any questions. Accordingly, it is with the above considerations in mind that I must indicate that I will not answer any questions posed to me once I...
She looks terrible, but I think part of that is not just stress, but lighting.
here before this committee. I note in
I'm actually surprised she's not currently in jail here in the U.S., so maybe she's cooperating with the American investigation.
taking this position that Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects me in situations where Section 13 does not apply.
By the way, after this, she just continually says she won't answer the question. She just won't reply to any questions that are given to her after she makes the statement.
Where life, liberty, or security interests are at stake. Considering the investigation taking place in respect of Kalashnikov, I verily believe that my refusal to answer questions is lawful and protected under Section 7 of the Charter. I also assert respectfully that in the relatively unique circumstances in which I find myself, Section 2D of the Canadian Bill of Rights, SC 1960-44, as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which
I wonder what happens to all the money that she got. Is it gone now? Did she give it back? Does it get seized by the U.S. and Canada? Is she poor now? Like, what's going on with that?
Canada is a signatory. Protect my refusal to testify. Please note that my refusal is contingent solely on my legitimate concerns about possible self-incrimination. Once the investigation has been completed and it is determined that there may be no future proceedings taken against me in respect of that or related matters, I wish that this honorable committee be aware that I would be willing to reattend before it and answer all questions on such issues.
Thank you, Mrs. Chen, for being here with us today. Although I'll note that you did not necessarily come willingly, you were summoned. You've outlined to this committee that you've come here and you won't be answering any of our questions. It's quite frustrating for us as committee members to have a witness here for 2 hours who refuses to answer any questions. And of course, you've been called here, as you outlined, in line with the Russian disinformation study that we're currently engaging, and notably because of your involvement in the indictment.
No, they're going to have some other people doing this that I'm going to be more interested in listening to. I think Lawrence Southern and a few others. So I'm interested to see what happens with that, and we might watch that on another date. Let's go on to Alex O'Connor. Yes, I already pre-watched this one. That's okay. All right. Let's do it from the beginning. I have some comments and some thoughts about this.
Yes. And I agree with you.
And charity of the Old Testament God is expressed in the instances where
Maybe he's playing a character in a movie, and that's why he has that terrible mustache. Mustache. Where is everybody? I should have gone on an hour earlier. Oh, sorry, guys. I was busy. I was busy eating lunch with a friend. Okay. Let's continue.
he commands the complete obliteration of entire nations of people, including the women and the children, and even the animals, in multiple.
So, part of my problem with this whole approach, let's not worry about where I'm going to get defensive and I'm going to start talking about how most of this stuff probably didn't even happen anyway. Let's not worry about that. Let's pretend all of it's legit. Like it's all 100% real, that the Jewish people understood correctly what God wanted, that the events as depicted on the Bible for this time period is not only accurate, but it supersedes whatever we have of the historical record and whatever we have in history books. Let's just assume it's 100% accurate. Stop, honey. I'm working. I know. Shh. You dropped my headset. It's okay. Sweetheart, don't make me kick you out. You're being too talkative. Okay. So, where were we? Oh my gosh. Honey, I'm going to kick you out. I'm sorry. Go. Shoo. I'm going to close the door. Thank you. Go. I'm serious. Go. Get out. Okay. Where were we? Okay, so here's my problem. Even if everything was 100% accurate and we're going to go completely literal, God, as God, is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the creator. He is the beginning. Before the beginning was, there was God. After the end is, there will be God. So, God not only creates the entire universe, he destroys the entire universe. Every single life form that has ever or will ever exist will be destroyed by God. Every single one. There is nothing that will outlive or outstrive God. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So everything that we have ever seen or ever known will be destroyed. Presumably by God, but you know, he can use incidentals. He can get it done however he wants to do it. So the point is that yeah, every single life that has ever existed or will ever exist will one day be destroyed by God. So what are we arguing about here? What's the moral offense? God will bring everything into existence, and God will bring everything to an end. So I don't get the moral offense here.
At multiple points throughout the history of the Israelites trying to conquer their holy land, which is promised to them by God, such that if anybody is already living there, they're driven out. And if they refuse to leave, they're chased out and they're killed. And then they come back and they kill the women and the children. Do you think that this is the same graceful, loving God that's issuing these commands?
No.
Yes.
Instead, I think we've got to read very carefully. First point, do I allow God to judge? In my culture, that's unacceptable. And yet the Bible insists God does have the right.
God judges. God judges everything. God is the righteous judge. Jesus is the righteous judge. He's going to judge. And he's judging you now. He's going to judge you. So, yeah.
Right to judge. Second point. Is exaggeration being used? Is hyperbole being used? In a lot.
But that's a different question. So if you're going to take the story as literal, then take it as literal. If you're going to be a Catholic about it and you're going to say, hey, this is not real history, this is a story, it's a polemic, well, then yes, there's hyperbole in there. Yes, there's exaggeration in there. Yes, there's all this other stuff going on in there, polemic. But you, Cliffy, you're not a Catholic. You believe in a plain and simple reading of the Bible. You believe the Bible is more true than history or science. So therefore, instead of trying to defend it, and instead of doing whatever it is you're about to do, whatever trick you're going to try to play, go to the end. God created everything. That's the beginning. God will destroy everything. Every single life that has ever existed will end, and it'll end because of God. God will destroy everything. God will outlast everything. Everything that God has created will one day end. It will all be destroyed by God's will. And we'll all be judged. And whatever we are after this mortal coil has ended, it isn't physical. Yeah, we're going to have physical bodies in heaven, divine, glorified bodies, fine. But material world as it exists right now will not exist. So maybe second heaven or seventh heaven or whatever we end up, maybe it's all refined and everything's back together. Or maybe whatever we are in that new life isn't us as we understand it now. Matter is no longer a thing. Therefore, we're thought beings. I don't know. Whatever a glorified body is, we don't even understand that. So I think this is a foolish exposition. But let's continue.
A lot of those passages. Yes, it is. Because clearly, obviously, many of those people who were supposedly all wiped out appear in the next book. So you know that they weren't all wiped out. Mm-hmm. Thirdly,
Yeah. But again, that's a very Catholic answer, and you're going to have a problem with the numbers.
You look at the archaeological evidence for Jericho and Ai, and you begin to realize those were probably smaller fortresses. Yes, Rahab was in there as a prostitute, but those were not just families and women and children. Those were fortresses.
Also, they probably weren't destroyed by the Israelites, and if they were, it's not the Israelites that are presented in the Bible. The Bible's telling a story based on the accepted facts of the time. It's not a lie, it's just they don't have the information we have now. And our information is not the same information we will have way later, so they're reconstructing a story based on the information that they had to tell a more truth. And that's it. Move on.
Fortresses that were protecting the families that lived out in the countryside around them. Next point is, I think that there is not the emphasis on individualism.
And hey, one day we might find that this is historically accurate, but right now we don't have that evidence. I like what he says here, though. This part is like the only part in the video where I was like, hey, Cliff's making a little bit of sense.
In the Old Testament that we have in our culture.
Yep.
And yet, the more we struggle through children of alcoholics and realize that there are real consequences that stretch down through the generations.
But yeah, so one of the arch heresies is individualism, as Americans were very individualistic. So here it's talking about collectivism and how individualism or radical individualism is wrong, and how, whole societies get punished for sins.
The Old Testament does present a picture that we are more interconnected than we as American individualists would like to admit. And when God judges a people group, yes,
American individualism is a heresy.
Some innocent people are swept along in the judgment, and that bugs me. I don't like that. And yet, that is part of, I think, what the Bible is talking about when it says we're created in the image of God, meaning that we do have free will, which means there are consequences to my decisions that affect my...
They're either not innocent in the eyes of God, or life is not the thing that we're looking at, and there's something else. Pick your poison.
My children. That affect my grandchildren. We're more interconnected than we would like to admit. So no, those children are not being punished for anything they did wrong, but yes, they're born into a cursed, messed up world, and there are consequences.
So me and Gur, we spent a lot of time looking at different societies, age of, it's not consciousness, it's not reason. Basically, like age of responsibility, like at what point you're actually guilty for the things that you do or responsible. Age of responsibility, there we go. And while, yeah, in the culture, you got like 15, you have 16, you have 18, you have 21, you have these different ages. I don't know of any religious culture that's 13, but I do know that 15 is an important year. But let's not worry about the bar mitzvah or any of that kind of stuff. Let's go with the Protestant, plain and simple reading. There's no age of accountability. So if you're guilty as a child, you're guilty. In a plain and simple read. So you don't get away from your sin just because you're a child. Now, again, in Jewish culture, that's not how it is. The Jewish people did not do a plain and simple reading of the Bible. That is a Protestant error. So for them, they have bar mitzvahs, they have cultural references, they have ways to gauge maturity. Christianity, same thing. In Catholic cultures, you have the quinceanera. So no, the plain and simple reading leads to error.
Consequences to that. I mean, I benefited from going to Davidson College, and a lot of people sacrificed to put Davidson together. You benefited from going to Oxford University, and there are a lot of people who have over many years given sacrificially to build that. So there are real consequences that stretch down through the generations of our decisions. And also, the Bible never says that those children and all those people go to eternity separate from God. I'm convinced that we will see those children in heaven if they were killed before an age of accountability. So,
again, is an age of accountability biblical, especially with non-Hebrew societies?
The justice of God will ultimately triumph.
Yeah.
But do I have problems with the text? Yes, of course I have problems with the text. I don't.
It's never bothered me. It doesn't bother me now. It didn't bother me then. It's never bothered me.
Understand it exactly. I don't understand what God is doing exactly there, why he says that kind of thing.
You're not supposed to. You submit.
But I'm also convinced that hyperbole is being used. And I think that's a very important thing. For instance, when I was in high school, we used to say, we're going to kill the opposing team that we're going to play that weekend. Not meaning we're literally going to kill them. And the whole idea of, in the Hebrew herem, H-E-R-E-M, of clearing out these people from the promised land. The whole idea that God had given them over 400 years to repent, and they had chosen not to, and now God clears them out. I think it's a complex.
Doesn't really work. For one thing, do you assume that the current Jewish people who are living in the land are actually living by Jewish law properly? Especially if you're a Christian, you believe that Jewish people got the law, the interpretation of the law, incorrect anyway, and that no one can live perfectly by the law. That whole thing. Okay, let's go a step further. Does that mean that you believe that America is due for a recompense, for a punishment by our God? Because we do a lot of things that are not allowed in the Bible. Like, seriously, like any theological or dogmatic interpretation of what the Bible actually means, our culture violates it. And even if you go a plain and simple read of the Bible, when you go Bible alone, you still have a lot of violations of what the Bible says compared to what our society is. So is our society due to a recompense, to a punishment, to a judgment? If it is, that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to try to defend our culture. Our culture is sick. Our culture has problems. But are you willing to say that? Not am I willing to say that. I'm willing to say whatever. I don't give a shit. Are you willing to say it?
Issue more complex than the person would allow it to be, who just says, I just can't believe that God would do something like that.
Like, what kind of instruction had these people been given? Like the people of Ai, the people of Jericho, the Canaanites. I mean, did they have Jewish prophets coming to them and saying, you should repent of your ways? Or were they just sort of expected?
No, just to be very clear, we don't know what, if, we don't even know if it happened, but let's pretend it did happen. We don't know what kind of wardens they might have had in their land. We're just seeing everything from the Jewish perspective. So if the Jewish people don't have a record of what happened there, then who knows? They could have had tons of warning.
To work it out on their own?
Fascinating question. I'm not sure. I do not know. Obviously, they have consciences. We all have consciences.
Yeah.
And when you study ethics from around the world, it's amazing that it seems we're all like reading off the same sheet music.
Yeah.
And there's
tremendous
more and
agreement.
more research coming out too on just how bad these people groups.
Sure.
That's just not a... The information about just how bad all of these ancient societies are, our current society is worse. So don't go there.
Well, right.
I'm seeing more of this.
Child sacrifice.
Exactly. It just gets
Yeah,
worse
yeah,
every
yeah,
year.
right.
Like how bad is it going to get? And so, but the second one, have you wrestled with this being a really culturally conditioned question?
Oh, absolutely,
Issue of
yeah.
yours? 'Cause the Chinese don't struggle with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I come from Taoism. I don't struggle with this problem. When I read this for the first time, it did not bother me. That's over 10 years ago. I've read it 7 times since, actually more than that now. I stopped counting after the 7th time I read through the Bible. I've read it in homilies and missals and church masses and liturgies. So I don't know how many times I've read this now, but it never bothered me, and it doesn't bother me now. Maybe that means I'm a little less Western than everybody else, but yeah.
I've talked to people of other cultures, and I brought it up and been like, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
That God judges in that kind of way.
It's so much worse because it's not just like culturally relative. Like I'm a moral anti-realist. I don't believe in the existence of objective moral values, right? And so like, what could I possibly be meaning here? But I don't wrestle with it because my job here isn't to say that this is wrong. My job is to say something like what Lincoln said of slavery. If this isn't wrong, then nothing is wrong. If there is such a thing as objective morality, I find it very. I mean, look, we just condemned the Canaanites in part for they were killing children. Well, that's exactly what God ordered the Israelites to do when they came into their nation. And we say, okay, well, these people were sinful, idolatrous, and...
Again, I don't have a problem with God judging. We're not the one condemning. He's the one doing the condemning. And to be fair, we don't even know if this part of the story actually happened, or at least not the way that it's reported to have happened.
They should have repented. Well, the same is true of the Israelites. They were sinful. They were idolatrous. And yet they had the benefit of having the prophet of God come to them with literal stone tablets telling them what to do. And even then it took them a few tries to get right. The Canaanites didn't have that. And yet when the Israelites are sinful, they get a prophet who comes and sets them straight. When the Canaanites are sinful, they get obliterated. They get exterminated. They get chased out.
Just the same way the Israelites were at first the hands of the Assyrians and then the Babylonians.
True, but it was wrong for the Assyrians to do that. It was wrong for the Babylonians to do that.
Yeah, but the Old Testament insists that...
No. When it's divine judgment, it is not wrong. When the Assyrians and Sumerians and I don't know, I'm going to start making up groups, Babylonians, Hittites, Egyptians, when any of them kick out the Jewish people, if it's done because of God's wrath or God's judgment, it is completely justified. Whatever happens to them is justified. Yes, they're calling out for vengeance. They're calling out for sorrow. They're calling out for forgiveness. But God is like, no, you're getting kicked out. Yeah, the Jewish people are being punished right now. God punishes the Jewish people. He punishes his own children. He is a good father.
That was part of God's judgment on the Israelites for them doing the child sacrifice, temple prostitution, idolatry. God, so it's God's. It gets back to, does God have the right to judge? Yes, he judged the Canaanites, but then remember, a few hundred years later, he judged the Jews, first at the hands of the Assyrians and then the Babylonians.
So I wanted to talk about the hyperbole thing, right? Because maybe we're not talking about killing everybody, maybe...
We're obviously not, because they were occurring in the next book.
But, okay, so...
Okay, again, let's break this down for Alex. 1, this didn't even happen, historically speaking. 2, whatever's happening in the book... BS, it's been that kind of week. We're just going to hit heavy topic after heavy topic. How you doing, my friend? 2, if God judges, it's automatically righteous. 3, the Bible itself is a record of the Jewish people's understanding. And saying Jewish people is even too broad. The Semitic people that are writing the Bible, whatever group they are at the time, whether they're Canaanite, Palestinian, Jewish, Hebrew, Semitic, Judean, Israelite, whatever group of Semitic people, Hebrew people are writing at the time, it's their perspective of what their relationship with God is, and it's their understanding of what they think God wants, and their reinterpretation of what they think God is saying. Okay, so already you got like layers. Then you have to deal with the fact that these are people writing after the fact about times that happened way before them that they weren't there for, and they're doing the best they can to tell the story the best that they understand it based on the circumstances that they're in, and then they're relaying it and relating it to the events that they just went through in the exile. So you have multiple layers before you get to anything that we would call fact in modern times. Again, that doesn't mean it's not true, but it does mean that it's not always factual, at least not the way that we understand factual. Yeah, there are facts in it, there is literalness in it. But what they think of as truth, what they think of as fact, we may have disproven nowadays. So you gotta layer all that in. And I'm sorry, Cliff, but you're not the guy to layer any of that in.
For example, in the destruction of Ai,
I would say that Alex O'Connor has a better understanding of the figurative and metaphorical approach to understanding the Bible and spiritual approach to understanding the Bible than Cliff does. And I'm not saying Alex has a good understanding of these things.
12,000 people fell that day, all the people of Ai. That's what's said.
Again, numbers probably made up, probably not real, probably didn't happen. It's probably symbolic of something else.
In the book of Joshua. Now, maybe all the people of Ai.
And who knows if the way that it was transmitted was corrupted or not.
Is like an exaggeration. But 12,000 people is pretty specific. It'd be a weird thing to be doing as hyperbole, right? We have a number of people, 12,000 people. We know it's men, we know it's women, we know it's children are slaughtered. We know that that's not hyperbole. We know that thousands of men were killed. We know that...
But again, it didn't actually happen.
I should quite... I don't want to get this wrong. Perhaps we should look at the text. Yeah, so in Joshua chapter 8...
Or at least we don't have evidence that it actually happened. We have one data point, which is the Bible, to corroborate it. But we can't use the Bible to corroborate itself. Unless you're using other books to corroborate it, but the other books disagree with this accounting. The other books within the Bible itself disagree with this accounting of the events.
When Israel had finished killing all of the men of Ai in the fields and in the wilderness where they had chased them, and when every one of them had been put to the sword, all of the Israelites returned to Ai and killed those who were in it. 12,000 people fell that day. 12,000 men and women fell that day. All the people of Ai. So we know that women are being killed, non-combatants are being killed. We know that there are thousands of them. We also know that...
And when I read battle accounts like this in Herodotus, which is an actual history, or the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is mythology, neither one of them makes me blink. Whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, none of these numbers make me blink. Even when I'm reading something like about World War II or World War I, these numbers don't make me blink. So I'm sorry, man. This is not hitting like you think it is.
There were people who had left. They'd run into the wilderness. They were out of the promised land. But the Israelites chased after them and then killed them in the wilderness. And it says all of them were put to the sword. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe that some of them ran away. Maybe all of the ones that they captured were put to the sword, but some of them managed to actually run away, and those are the people who show up in the next chapter. But it's only because,
No, this is... Okay. So you're a post-Exilic Israelite? I don't even know who you are at this point. You mean Alex O'Connor? Yes, I realize Alex O'Connor is becoming a Protestant, militant, fundamentalist. You're absolutely correct, B.S. Lewis. It's good to know that Cliff, though, is slowly becoming an atheist. So really, and this redheaded guy an agnostic. So it's just people changing sides. but aside from the fact that Alex O'Connor is becoming an agnostic, and beside the fact that Cliff has been doing this as a practice for a really long time, how do I put it? Even if you believe, oh, this is real. No, that's the wrong way to put it. When I hear a story about 300 men being slaughtered, whether it's in the Alamo or whether it's at Gallipoli or whether it's at wherever the 300 fought, I don't go, oof. And I got to say a word that gets demonetized, but it's the only way to mention the book. The Rape of Neptune. Okay, I read that book one summer while I was selling cars, and I was reading it on my downtime, and that book destroyed me. Like for a week, I had trouble selling cars. It wasn't just the graphic imagery. It wasn't just the descriptions. It wasn't just the photos. It wasn't just the numbers, the absolute numbers. It was the detail in the killing. What a lot of these stories do is that whether it's the Iliad or the Odyssey or any other ancient war account, even if you're talking about the historical stuff like Julius Caesar's account of Gaul or his invasion of Britain, even Xenophon's, is it Xenophon who does the expedition? Who writes the expedition? I think it's Xenophon. You don't get into gory detail. You kind of tell it in generalities. And you tell kind of historic stuff, like just give a little bit of flair, a little bit of excitement, just to remember the points and the details, because you're going to sing this later so people can remember the story. But with these tales, the ones that you weren't there for, you're kind of given a general gist of what you believe happened. So the people who are writing this story may truly believe their ancestors really did conquer these lands. Even though there's no way their ancestors could have conquered Jericho, they believe that their ancestors are the ones who did it. So they tell the story based on what they see, how the layout of the land is. They don't understand that geography changes over time. They don't understand that where the river is now is not where the river was 100 years ago, let alone 1,000 years ago. They don't have that knowledge base. But they're going to tell the story based on where the layout of the land is now and based on the social, political situation as it is now. And they're going to use that story as a metaphor, as an analogy to explain the current situation. That's what's happening. They're basing it on their best knowledge of what was and what is, and they're relating it to what is and what could be. And it's that middle part that's the connecting gap between those two ways of storytelling. Cliff can't acknowledge that. He has to have this be real in a factual sense. And while there are facts in there, they're jumbled up. They're mixed up with a bunch of different things. Jericho and Ai and Tyr all happen at the same time when it couldn't have. Like all these battles happen at the same time, done by the same people, when you look at the historical record, they're hundreds or thousands of years apart.
For want of trying, that they managed to survive. But maybe it is just hyperbole. But we know that 12,000 people were killed. We know that the Israelites then turned around after killing the fleeing combatants, came back into the city and killed who's left. Well, who's left?
And again, where I was getting to the point before I got distracted with BS, is that they're describing warfare as it existed at their time. So even though they're talking about Bronze Age warfare, they're describing Iron Age warfare. Even though they're in Bronze Age warfare, they're talking about Stone Age warfare. You see what I'm saying? Like they're using their modern way of warfare, and so they're fighting in a way that they could not have fought in at the previous time period. but they're reflecting the reality of combat at their time. So yeah, maybe 12,000 people didn't die 200 years ago or 300 years ago or 500 years ago when the story supposedly happened. But when the people who are actually writing it, that's how battles happened. And they're going to try to exaggerate the number, make it bigger than what it really was or what it could have been. But they're doing it with the purpose of the propaganda. I don't think Cliff is going to acknowledge any of that.
The women, the children, the disabled. So even if there's some hyperbole being involved here in terms of the complete destruction, maybe it's not a
But it is describing real warfare at the time of the writings. So even if these particular Israelites didn't commit this war crime, Israelites of the time of the writing or other armies of that time of the writing did to other people. This is what warfare was like in ancient times.
genocide.
It gets that part
But it certainly
right.
still seems to be the kind of military practice which, if done today, would see condemnation and a lot more from the United Nations. In First Samuel,
All you got to do is look back at Vietnam, where we were the evil, guilty party. Yeah, this kind of shit happens, and we do it. We did it to people. We don't need to fantasize in Israeli army in ancient times doing bad things. We can see our armies doing bad things now.
um,
And I realize me saying Vietnam is now makes me sound very old. I'm not that old.
there's this again. I should read the text to be sure, and I do have it written down. This is the destruction of the Amalekites. God issues the command now: go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to the death men.
I'm curious if any of the battles in the Old Testament before the what you guys call the Apocrypha, before the Deuterochronicles, before Maccabees, are any of the battles historical? I know Kadesh is. Kadesh is a real battle that happened. So you have the Battle of Kadesh, which is kind of like briefly mentioned, I think. But are there any other battles that we can pinpoint to matching the actual battles that happened? Any of the big brains or big names that watch my channel, let me know. Let me know if any of the battles that are in the Old Testament relate to actual battles that actually happen. And I'm not talking about battles that other cultures did, that the Semitic people, Hebrew, Israelite, Judaic, whatever, Davidic, whatever group you want to say, are the people who are the main characters in the Bible, any of the battles that were involved in, are they any of these confirmed as actual real battles that really took place? I know that when we get to the Maccabees, some of them are, but the rest of the Bible, anything?
And women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Of course, this can't be literal because it's not just the camels and sheep and the donkeys. Oh, but you can leave the, you can leave the pigs or whatever. Sure, this is sort of like slightly rhetorical language, but it's very clear. Like, leave alive nothing that breathes. Kill the men, kill the women, kill the animals, kill the cattle. And in fact, when Saul decides at the end of the battle to keep alive the king, take him as a hostage, and also keeps alive some of the animals to sacrifice, to slaughter as a sacrifice to God.
That's kind of a heavy question, but I'll read it out loud and then give me a minute to think about it before I answer, okay? BS asks, Alpha, what are your thoughts about the biblical genocide stories influencing modern day propaganda against Palestine? I have to pull kind of a Cliff, but I don't mean it in the way that Cliff does. And I'm not trying to do whataboutism, even though it's what it's going to start off as. It's going to start off as a whataboutism, but it's going to become a non-whataboutism. I don't even know what to say, how to word that. When you read the Quran and the way that warfare is described and the way that warfare, which by the way, some scholars now are saying that even the battles in the Quran are not real battles. Let's not worry about that. The battles that the Quran are describing and the warfare that it's prescribing to the Muslims and Islamists to use is ugly warfare. It's war crime warfare. It's not okay. Interesting strategy, but very duplicitous and very ugly. And the modern Muslim who's reading the Quran is also instructed that the Bible is true, both the Old and New Testament. So they have Revelation, they have the Old Testament, the Canaanites, which, they have their own way of interpreting that, and you have what the Quran describes as a way of understanding it and how to prescribe warfare. So when I say what I'm going to say next, I'm not talking about the Israelites, the Christians, or the Muslims. All three of them are influenced by this. And if you want proof of that, there are battle tactics in the Bible that are used by soldiers in World War II on both sides. They look at passages in the Bible and then they find that real mountain or that real area, and they do the same battle tactic that was used in the Bible in real life to have the same victory. So I think both sides, both the Muslim Palestinian and the Jewish Israeli, are influenced by the Bible and the Quran. Both are influenced in how they fight their warfares. So I don't think it has to do so much with modern day propaganda as I grew up on Optimus Prime and Megatron. I've been in fights where I fought like Optimus Prime. I grew up reading Wolverine, not watching the cartoon, not seeing the movies, reading the comic book. There are fights where I fight like Wolverine. I've literally done some of the claw moves in fights, and people are like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "What martial art is that from?" And I don't tell them that it's from a comic book. I just do the move, I win the fight, and I move on. If that's the power narrative has over a teenager's mind, over a young man's mind, that the stories they heard from childhood influences the way that they fight as an adult, then yes, the religious stories of the Quran, the religious stories of the Hebrew text. And remember, Jewish people hold the Hebrew text and the Quran as true. And the New Testament is true. So these types of warfare, absolute victory is called for, not partial victory. It has to be absolute. Yes, they influence them. Yes, every single warrior out there wants to be David. Every single warrior wants to be Solomon. Every single warrior wants to be Samson. All of them. So, I think that it absolutely does influence them. But I don't think it's about the propaganda, man. I think it's how they actually fight, how they conduct the war. I don't think it's the BS that they're talking. I think it's the way they actually fight is influenced by their faith and by the stories they were told of their faith as children, not just as adults. That's my answer, BS. I hope that was comprehensive and I didn't ramble too much there. Was that a good answer, BS? Did you kind of get what I was saying?
What happens? He's condemned. And God says, the scripture says, that God regretted that he made Saul king. He regretted that he made Saul king because he didn't follow his command. What command didn't he follow? That after wiping out the Amalekites, he refused to also kill all of the animals, and he kept the king alive as a hostage. And that was enough for God to say, I regret that I ever made Saul king because he didn't follow my commands. And so I understand that there may be some hyperbole involved here, but in the case where Saul is punished, specifically not for killing all of the animals, it's hard for me to imagine how much scope there is for hyperbole here in terms of undermining the criticism that we are talking about the slaughter of innocent people here.
Mm-hmm. It shows.
Yeah, but and again, it's going to sound like, but the way that the Palestinians and hold on. But the way that the Palestinians talk about the Jewish people is also related to what's in the Quran. And both of these groups are being influenced by the by their holy books on how to fight, and by the stories that they grew up on as kids. The calling a group of Amalekites, it would be like me calling a group the Canaanites, or a different group. If you're from that region, this happens in the Bible itself. If you're from the region, you're going to get named from that region. I'm Native American, except my family tribe is totally unpronounceable. It's like Colachian or something like that. But let's say, that Trump starts using the Colachian name as the people to push out of the United States. If we got to fight the Colachians. You can think of it as a slur, but you can also think of it as, they're using their ancestral name. Netanyahu, if he's using that type of story, that's what he's doing. But the BS, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm telling you. The Muslim people also use the same biblical story, but they're the good guys in their understanding of it. The Muslim people believe the Hebrew Bible is their holy book as well. So they both have the exact same story. They're both reading the same story. They just have a different interpretation of who is the correct person.
The importance and just how clear God wants to make it that Israelites are to be set apart and a holy people. And so whether it's an ant or a soldier all the way down, we see with sinful human beings just how easy it is for them to slip into prostitution, but more so getting a harem, more so whatever this might be, and slip into assimilation of some sort with other civilizations.
We have all those things now in the U.S., so are you saying that the U.S. should be attacked? Because that's not good. Or Australia or any other country that has prostitution and abortion. I think your justification for the destruction of the Canaanites is... I think you're blinding yourself to the culture that you're in, to condemn a culture that you're not in. Well, I wasn't talking about whether or not it was true or false, although I did have that conversation earlier before you came into the room, BS. What I'm saying is that both sides are using the same story as inspiration for their fighting. And both sides are claiming that they're the true ancestor, the true hero, if you were the true protagonist of the Bible. But it's not, how do I put it? If the religion didn't exist, the fighting would still happen because of the political circumstances of the reality of the situation there. So I'm not one to blame fiction or religion or video games on people's actions in real life. Yeah, they can have an influence, but that doesn't take away people's personal responsibility. If Netanyahu is guilty of war crimes, then he's guilty of war crimes regardless of whether or not he was inspired by the Bible or Transformers or Dune. It doesn't matter. The fact that the Bible is representing what real warfare was like during the exilic period when these stories were actually written does not make the story evil. It just means that it's an accurate representation of ancient warfare. Even if the events that they're describing are not events that took place at the time or place that they say they took place.
And so God has to act in this kind of way, however extreme it seems.
If I read stories about ancient, warfare, the Mongols or the Japanese, and I go to that area and I conquer an area using their strategy, it's not the historical event's fault, or the writer who chose to record the historical event's fault that I chose to reenact and use that story for inspiration for my own acts. The history is still the history. And this is what they're writing is the history that they understood at that time.
Seems to show them, whether it's Achan later on in Acts chapter 5, for example, the temptation and how quick this happens. It's such a slippery slope where God is saying, here's the line, and we have to do away with.
If I read an alternate history of the Civil War, and then I lead an insurrection, it's not the writer of that book's fault that I reenacted or used for inspiration what he wrote. I don't think I can make it any clearer than that, BS. It's not the Bible's fault that people use biblical stories for inspiration to do horrible things.
With any level of temptation, you talked about temptation earlier. We know how easy it is to fall prey to temptation. This is another thing with university students and older people. All they want to talk about is temptation and how easy it is to fall typically into like porn addiction and these kinds of things. Well, very similar to what's going on there in terms of you have to kill off any and everything that's going to cause temptation because you are God's holy chosen people. Okay, well, whoa, isn't that really ethnocentric? Isn't that a big issue still? I don't see that in my mind because I believe what's going on in the Old Testament with the Israelite people is probably the most exclusive inclusivity you could ever imagine, which is God is this God of the Israelites who are holy people who are not supposed to mix at all, even with an animal, with people of another civilization. So that's how exclusive they are, but how inclusive in the sense of they're a light to all the nations. And eventually it's going to come through the Son of God, Jesus Christ, who is literally Samaritan, child, woman, all the oppressed people groups, and Zacchaeus, like we talked about earlier, Luke chapter 19, the sycamore tree, who attached to that, probably very wealthy. So it's a light to all nations, and that separateness, that word holy and righteousness, he takes so seriously and so extreme. I wish it wasn't that extreme, but it stacks up to me. It also makes sense seeing how powerful human temptation really is and how hard it is to restrain yourself.
Do you believe that, to be clear, do you believe that innocent children were killed by Israelites on the command of God? Because it's historical.
No, I mean, I believe that God definitely gave that land to the Israelites by the mere fact that the Israelites live on that land. But just because, and also, how would I parse that? I would say that this, if you want to use the word narrative, I would say that the story is true, but the characters aren't necessarily the characters that did it, and the facts might be wrong. Put it that way.
Oracle fact.
Or the facts are incongruent with our current evidence. You want to really be technical.
I believe that innocent children were killed by Israeli bombs, and they happen to be Palestinians, part of Hamas maybe, or Hezbollah. I believe that there are consequences to human decisions that stretch.
If there was ancient warfare that happened in Israel at that time, then yes, innocent people and collateral damage. Innocent people died and collateral damage happened.
Down through the generations and then impact a lot of innocent people. And I think we're a little naive if we think that we can go into Iraq or fight a desert storm and no innocent people are going to be killed. It's one of the tragedies of war, which is a result of the sinful human heart.
But suppose, the Israeli government said,
I kicked her out. I closed the door. And now she's knocking to get back in.
leave alive nothing that breathes. Kill the soldiers, but then once you've done that, turn around, go back, kill the women, kill the children, kill their animals. Because this land is yours.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people wouldn't be satisfied.
Yep.
I'm going to let her back in.
Hey, this is the consequence of war. This is what happens. I think people would say,
I'm
okay,
coming.
but the fundamental rule of just war, which I'm told is sort of stems out of the Christian tradition, is proportionate response. And
Yes, and I agree with you. Okay, but here's another problem. God told Abraham to take Isaac up on Mount Moriah and sacrifice his son. Now, if someone interprets that as being God's laying down wise principles for good parenting, they're an idiot.
Sure, yeah.
That is not what Genesis chapter 2 is communicating. God gave Abraham a very specific command, and it was not to give an example of wise parenting. It was, Abraham, who's number one in your heart? Is it going to be God or is it going to be your son? Who are you going to build your future on? Your son or me? Similarly, what Israel does there in the Old Testament is not examples of just war theory. No, it is a unique example of God using a theocracy, and we don't live in a theocracy, we don't have a theocracy in Israel now, and we're definitely not a theocracy in the United States or in UK. God using a theocracy to carve out a land that he brings then Messiah into. That's a one-time deed, because you're absolutely right. It is not an example of just war. No way. I recall.
Hey, Thomas.
Well, at that as you do, I'm sure.
Yeah, because of course the difference in this case is that you have the orders from the top
will
man.
fight you.
It's sort of, if there is some extraordinary circumstance in which this kind of otherwise morally condemnable behavior can be justified, you better have the authority to know that you're making the right decision. And in this case, the Christian will be able to say that they did have that authority. But I mean, it's a struggle.
Yes, it is.
We're talking about the intentional killing of non-combatant children here. And I read this text as a land dispute. I read in Deuteronomy where God gives instructions when you march up onto a city to attack it, like in the broad sense. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace.
BS, were you able to watch all of Into the Viper Den Part 2? Thomas, also, did you watch my latest video upload? I plan on doing more interviews like this going into the future.
They accept and open their gates. All the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. Some peace. If they refuse to make peace and engage in battle, which isn't entirely unreasonable given what the terms of peace are, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, and the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves, and you may use the plunder
What'd you think, BS?
the Lord gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat the cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. Women and children being described as plunder that can be used because God has given them to you as plunder. But of course, those are the people who you're attacking not because they're in the promised land. And it's just, look, we gave them a chance to leave.
She's
What are we
stabbing
supposed
me.
to do? This is God's chosen.
She's stabbing me. You say you love me, but then you stab me with your nails. Oh, brrr. Yeah, act cute.
No, these are other cities. Because it goes on. However, in the cities of the nations, the Lord...
Thomas, it's a follow-up from an interview I did before the election. A few months before the election, I went to a party where there were, I think, 12 people who all opposed my opinions on religion and religion and politics, and it turned into a political conversation. I didn't keep all of the political conversation because some of the participants asked, once it became a political conversation, they asked not to be in the video, and some of them got really heated. So I edited some of that stuff out. So I only focused on a few people in the original video. When I came back to refilm the follow-up, only 2 of the original, I'm going to say 12 participants wanted to be in the follow-up video. So, yeah, he's, to be honest, he had a lot more cussing. I had to take out some of the cussing out of Nikki's stuff. And then the other guy's name is Adrian.
Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Do not leave alive anything that breathes.
So I don't think I kept it in the original cut of the first interview. I went like this was an after party that they were having where they were celebrating political stuff. Not this one, but the original interview. And I went in there as a cat. They're all atheists. They're Democrat, progressive, and there was another person. I think there was an anarchist. And I was in there talking about Catholicism, Christianity, and Republicanism. And someone was a socialist. And when they got to the point where they asked me, well, why are you even thinking about supporting? Why would you call yourself a Republican? Why would you call yourself a Catholic? So I took 10 steps, because there's a little place you could walk, and every step that I took, I said a different reason why I'm a Christian. Then I turned around and I did 10 steps back, doing 10 different reasons while I was a Republican. And then the reasons that I listed for that ended up being the reasons, or the concerns that ended up being addressed in the election. And when I asked him about that, because he said, "Oh no, those things are irrelevant. They won't affect the election. Nobody cares about those things." And I'm like, "Well, people cared." And he's like, "Yeah, I know." And he said, I still wouldn't make it part of the platform, and I still wouldn't change what we were talking about. I still wouldn't take those issues away." So it was very interesting. It was an interesting conversation to have on the follow up. I tried not to be a jerk about it, although I might have teased them a little bit. But yeah,
It's completely destroy them. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all detestable things that they do in worshipping their gods.
I'm jealous that he has hair. I miss having hair. I'm not jealous of his mustache. I'm just going to tell you the truth.
And you will sin against the Lord your God. So clearly what you're saying about them being these detestable characters and God is issuing his judgment must be true here, because it's saying that otherwise, if you don't destroy them completely, they will teach you their ways, you will fall into sin. But this idea of, marching up to a city, and even if they accept you, they're going to become, your indentured servants. And if they don't, then you may take the women and children as plunder, and you may use the plunder the Lord gives you. But of course, if you're marching into a city of one of the nations that you've been promised by God, then don't leave alive anything that breathes. Kill all of the children, kill all of the women. I mean, it's the difference there, in other words, about like the people in the inherited lands and the people outside of it, tells me that the explanation for why these people need to be completely and utterly destroyed is because this is our land. We want this land. Seems to be, and when I read about somebody intentionally driving out or killing nations of people so that they can sort of essentially ethnically cleanse a land, I don't know what else to call that other than a genocide.
But it's still eventually, the point is to welcome them in. It's not like they're going to sit in the land flowing with milk and honey forever, and again, be God's chosen people, and that's it. So that's one. Secondly, we're reading this.
That's a non-answer.
And from our 21st century Judeo-Christian lens. So your outrage.
I used to ghostwrite, and one of the names I would use as a ghostwriter was debonair.
Indignation over this is entirely Christian. That's why the Bible is self-critiquing, which I love about it.
But I spelled it Devon-air. Debonair.
Thirdly, putting to the sword, even women and children, as messed up as that sounds, many would say that was actually more gracious in that time period than other civilizations who they're going to get raped the rest of their lives, right? And just horrific things that are unimaginable to us. So that's another really important thing to remember. And then lastly, the one you got to wrestle with is, okay, so in an ancient Near Eastern culture, you're looking for God to act in a very humane kind of way. All right, to what extent? And what extent does free will come into play as well? Not just the evil heart of humankind. But how exactly do you want to play God? Because I want to play God too in those passages. But what does that look like? What specifically does that look like?
Watch the full conversation with Cliff and Stuart.
You're quoting the video. All right, let's go to the next one. Hold on. It's another Alex O'Connor thing. Give me a second. Oh, we're going to go to Ruslan. I think Ruslan has it. Okay, so this is going a little bit longer than I had wanted to, so this might actually be the last video. And we'll go to the other stuff tomorrow. Could you stop?
Alex O'Connor, who's been doing a lot of favors to theists, if we're going to be honest.
If I went back in time with a Panasonic video camera and put that camera in front of the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, would the little LCD screen show a man walk out of that tomb?
I would suspect yes. Alex, if you're watching this, I appreciate you. Well, apparently, Destiny and him did a live stream.
Okay. You don't believe in God, do you?
No. Whoa. And Alex tried to convince Destiny the possibility of a God existing? This is incredible stuff, man. Alex O'Connor out here just doing the Lord's work. I'm all for it, brother. All right, let's jump into it.
Had your kids, had your wife.
Explicit.
Let's see if he did a better job than me. I
Explicit.
debated Destiny on the No Jumper podcast at the end of 2022. I thought I did a good job. I think Destiny was high out of his mind.
This might be more of your realm. So maybe if they don't land it where you hope, you can bring it home for Alex O'Connor.
Yeah, I'll close him.
To win on.
Yeah, to fight from.
That's one of my favorite hills. I love a good subversion. One of my favorites is, I will win on this hill. That's my favorite.
I like that.
Yeah.
I won on a lot of hills. I'm gonna remember that.
I will die on this fence.
Ooh, that's
if you're sort of like I'm sort of violently agnostic about God's existence, and I'm sort of I recently stumbled on this. I'm like, no, I don't have an opinion, but I will die on this fence. It's sort of a.
When you say agnostic, what do you mean? Like can't have knowledge about it, or you just like are an undecided loser?
I think one cannot have knowledge of the kind that is exemplified in your empiricist rationalist.
Okay, that's fine. That's a good agnostic position,
including me.
Okay. So he's agnostic and he's willing to die on the hill of not knowing.
Die? No, he said die on the fence.
Die on the fence of not knowing?
Yeah.
Is there something I'm missing here?
I think Ruslan doesn't understand humor.
No.
Or
no,
sarcasm.
It's not a great position, but it's a skeptic position.
I don't know, but I'm willing to die on sitting on the fence? Go on.
You don't believe in God, do you?
No.
Whoa.
What an absolutely ridiculous question.
Whoa. What do you mean by God when you say I don't believe in God? Like, what's the reference of the word God there?
Wow, what a deep theory of language question. Any type of like metaphysical, but the problem is that.
He did the Jordan Peterson
Yeah, I
hands.
know.
He did the Jordan Peterson
That's the
hands.
best thing. They're definitely, it's late night. They're disheveled.
Yeah.
They're,
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
this is so good.
Okay, so he asks him if you believe in God, and then he said,
He
what do you
looks
mean by
drunk.
that? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The real mean you run into is like a physicalist, materialist, atheist kind of
I
person.
really don't like Destiny. I've said this before. I will not support Destiny in any kind of way. I'm only doing this because I want to hear what Alex O'Connor has to say. But there's like 3 people I'm no longer interested in interacting with online ever again. One of them is Brian Halsworth, unless he repents of his condemnation of Jewish people during the Inconquista and during the Reconquista and the I can't remember the other word, but during the Reconquista and the Inquisition. There we go. And another one is Destiny. I'm not interested in ever supporting him in any kind of way. And then I can't remember the third guy right now. But there's a third guy I don't ever want to deal with. Oh, it's a girl.
Person is that technically you are
Sniper Wolf. I'm not ever interested in supporting Sniper Wolf ever again.
So you kind of like circularly bought into the idea of no God.
I will gladly donate money to Dan McCullen, Kip Davis, Tiff Jab. Trying to think of a few other people that are a bit offensive. Anyway, I'll support B.S. Lewis. I'll help him out. I will not support Destiny. I will not support SS Sniper Wolf, and I will not support Brian Halsworth.
God, that I think that like anything metaphysical existing is almost tautologically impossible. Because when you ask an atheist, you ask me, well, how do you prove the existence of a metaphysical thing? I say, well, this time I can measure it. But the second you can measure or capture anything, it becomes.
And again,
What do you think about that?
I'm not saying that it's that I'm unforgiving here. If Brian Halsworth repents of what he said about Jewish people, me and him can have a conversation. If I ever become famous and big on YouTube, and he repents, he can come on my show. Destiny would have to donate all of his money to the poor, and he would have to apologize seriously to Donald Trump. That's what he would have to do. I don't like Hassan either, but I can see myself interacting with Hassan for multiple reasons. But yeah.
You can't measure love.
Heyo.
So I would hope that Destiny
What a romantic.
would acknowledge that he loves his kid. He has a son. I would hope he would acknowledge that his son loves him.
He'd probably die on that fence and be like, I can't prove that I love my son, so maybe I don't love my son.
So you can't acknowledge if you can acknowledge that love is a real thing, and it's not just chemical reactions, and it's not just your
but he can't do that.
Not metaphysical, right? He said you can't prove anything metaphysical. I think he would acknowledge you could prove love. Free
No,
will.
He wouldn't. I've heard him argue that it's just chemical.
Alex O'Connor doesn't believe in free will. I think Destiny believes in free will. I'm not sure, but that you're more than just like a bag of flesh acting on your lowest level, whimsome instincts. I would think that he believes that there's some form of free will that you can like drive your life into the ground by being on meth and 200 pounds overweight, and then turn it around and be a clean, sober, fit. Do is get the most amount of dopamine as quickly as possible in you through drugs and food and well then
He might be a heathenist, man. You don't know that.
That's actually
why is everybody not 400 pounds and
If he's a hedonist, then he doesn't care what you have to say about any of this.
Yeah.
South Park.
Yellowstone.
Oh.
Yellowstone.
Wow. It's dark.
God is not.
What's the harm? Yeah, but if he
BS. Do you love me? Am I a chemical reaction in your brain?
exists outside of any qualia, any sort of like sensory perception, any sort of like testing, then how do you even?
Because God is being itself. So God is.
God,
so
in this situation, are you Victor or are you Penguin?
So you know when what's that park in, like, is it in California?
South Park.
Yellowstone.
Oh.
Yellowstone. Yellowstone for years was exhibiting signs of volcanic activity, and scientists spent decades trying to find the volcano. They were looking around Yellowstone Park. They're like, we see volcanic activity.
Yep.
Where's the volcano? They're searching through Yellowstone, trying to find the volcano for years. They can't find it. They're like, what the fuck? We can't find the volcano. We see all the volcanic activity. They're searching for the volcano.
Okay. Wait, he's finishing last thought.
They finally realize they're looking for the volcano everywhere, and then at some point they suddenly realize, it dawns on them, the park,
the Aristocats,
the volcano. The whole thing is the volcano.
That's a very pantheism, like all things are God view, you know?
Yeah.
I like how he's thinking for existence.
Yeah.
I really feel Ruslan doesn't understand things. I've seen him on Lily Rose, whatever, podcast, and hearing him talk this here, I kind of feel he doesn't understand basic things. B.S. Lewis says he uses love sparingly, like a potent seasoning.
But I like that he's asking these questions and he's thinking in these ways.
And he's pitching it in a non-orthodox way. He's
and so does Alex, apparently.
Yeah.
Definitionally winning that and saying, cringe.
Mystic point.
Yeah, so then they finish right there.
Hey, man, he closed him on it.
Destiny believes in God.
Yeah, Destiny believes in God. Look at that. And so
I've heard
that, my friend. You are looking.
No, that's
you
cringe.
Are looking for the volcano.
Yes, if you want to redefine God as being the entire universe, then I guess I believe in God. Congratulations.
You want to redefine God.
He closed him on it.
Destiny believes in God.
Yeah, Destiny believes in God. Look at that. And so does Alex, apparently.
Yeah.
Definitionally winning that and saying.
Yeah, but yet he has a much larger audience than I probably will ever have, my friend. So, being clever and being smart as being good looking and being of the in crowd is usually more important than being clever and smart.
Cringe.
So mystic point.
Yeah, so then they finish right there.
Hey, man, props to Alex O'Connor doing the Lord's work. Yeah. I believe
he got a profession of faith out of Jordan Peterson.
Got a profession of faith in the resurrection out of Jordan
Peterson. He just
Peterson.
turned Destiny to a theist.
He turned it more of a deist.
More deist. Yeah.
I am. I hope I can talk to these guys someday. I've reached out to Destiny several times. I've talked to him on the No Jumper podcast. I would love to talk to Alex. I think Alex is much closer than he likes to admit he is.
I just can't be dishonest. I think that's my big problem. My big problem is that I'm always telling the truth. So when I don't know something, I actually tell people I don't know something. And when I'm wrong, I actually apologize and admit that I'm wrong. I think those are my two biggest downfalls for being a YouTuber. Let's do just a little bit. 5 minutes of. I'm too hot, honey. You're like a heater. She was sitting on my lap, and I'm starting to die from heat. Okay, I'm gonna do just a few minutes of. I think it's on my. No, leave me alone. Leave me alone. No, you're a bully. You're bullying me. No, you're picking on me. No, be quiet. No, stop. What? You're mean. You kicked my cat out of my room and you took his spot and you made him go sit on the breakfast nook. Poor Frank used to rule this entire room and look what you've done to him. Meow. You're not even my main cat, and you've taken over this entire house. That's right. You heard me. She's trying to be cute now. Oh, what am I looking for? Where is it? Shit. I forgot where it was. Let me go back to my watch later. Home. No, not YouTube music. Let's go to watch later. I don't think I'm going to find it, guys. I think we might already be at the end of the video. Let me just... Where is watch later? Okay, let's go to watch later. We'll do this. I wanted to do this one tomorrow. Is Trinity Biblical? Where is... Well, my video. There it is. We'll do just a little bit of this. Oh, leave me alone. What do you want? You're too warm.
And since the scripture does not teach transubstantiation in any meaningful sense that we can ever find, we don't hold to it for obvious reasons.
So, when I'm going to do this video in full probably later on this week, but what Lady in Flowers is missing is that he keeps on skipping the truly, 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 truly I say to you, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And he just skips that, and he gets into a semantical argument and a few other... He clearly doesn't have a good understanding of what the Catholic claim is, so that's also a problem.
So what's our case for these things, if not what they argue?
All right, guys, I'm going to go to the big screen. Oh. B.S. Lewis, thank you for coming by today. Thomas, thank you for coming by. That looks like it was pretty much it for today. Thank you, both of you guys. I appreciate you. Please, if you haven't, go watch Into the Viper's Den. Leave comments. Please like the video if you like it, of course. And I will talk to you all tomorrow. Let's do some outro music.
Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps I take from my bed to the floor. 5, 6, 7, 8. Will today be rough or will today be great? 9, 10, 11, 12. Lately I've been going through hell. 13, 14, 15, 16. Today's the day. Are you coming? Are you I'm sick of being normal? I'm sick of being average. I'm sick of being mortal. I'm about to be a savage. I see a lot of things that I want. I will have them. I got a new mindset that I just established. I'll march through the cold with the nails on the pavement. I'll shovel that coal just to get out the basement. My story will be told, helping others make changes. I'll be so bold they will watch in amazement.